Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe in evolution because it is the only logical explanation for existence.
Sweet.
I don't consider humans to be naturally anything, so not really. I think if they are violent, it's because of the culture that's influenced them.
I don't believe so. I believe that other species have, nuances to the way that they connect with each other that we can't even come close to understanding. I mean, birds have all these different calls that, I don't understand, but they mean completely different things to other birds. So, no, I don't think that humans necessarily have more complex languages than any other sort of species.
I don't consider humans to be naturally violent. I think it's a construction of our patriarchal society that humans are supposed to be naturally violent, and that's only happened since the rise of culture and society. Before that, you never heard of humans being violent. It's just since we moved from hunter-gatherer status, all of a sudden men are supposed to be violent. Everyone's
I would say that human language is more complex than the language of other species, but I do think people underestimate the complexity of animal language. And I think the more that we study it, the more that we see that animals are way more intelligent and have more communication skills than we once believed. But I do believe that human beings have more complex language.
Could you explain it a little bit? How do they affect how you interpret the world?
Because my culture and my understanding of the world, it's regarding whatever I came from.
I do, because I got 3 wisdom teeth. I don't know where that 4th one is, but pretty sure that we had a 4th one at some point.
Alien intervention and necessity.
I feel, yes, certainly, since human language has developed in response to demands to name things. Functionally, human language names things. By identifying them, we understand them as a shared cultural concept. Even across language barriers, you can still point and describe it with your hands as a form of shared language.
Yes, I do, because I think even back in the really old days when you had cavemen, they still had, fights between the two of them, between people. People are always out for themselves, and I think you're always going to see some sort of conflict when, both people are wanting the same thing, whether they're fighting over food or fighting over shelter or fighting over those, basic needs that people have to have. And so I think that you're always going to see people kind of, find conflict with each other.
Survival of the fittest, and it means that, for example,
but every time I always do watch her.
I always joke about natural selection being when people run across the street and they don't get hit, but I figure, they're more likely to get hit and probably not carry on their genes, so that's natural selection, or when people do stupid things. So I use it kind of jokingly.
No face, but some body is okay. Alright,
Ready?
What does natural selection mean to you?
Natural selection, to me, would be a species, ours or a different one, the strongest, the smartest, the healthiest, the best genes going on, and the lesser falling away and dying out. I guess that's it.
Means that species survive based on how well they survive. Whatever survives is what continues on and spreads its genes and influences the species as a whole.
If they're the
Things are selected for survival.
I think that studying primates helps us understand human nature better because a lot of the characteristics that they display when they're interacting can be seen when people interact. And I think that a lot of our, wanting to communicate and just behaviors are the same.
That's sweet.
That helps. I actually think that it's not. I think that our language, if we're just talking about verbal language, is actually very confusing and is misinterpreted very often. I know that some bacteria have, what is it they do? Just shoot out chemical chains to communicate, basically, and I think that's incredible, and that's obviously not going to get misinterpreted. So no, I don't think it's more complicated.
I think human language is more complex than that of other species because how many languages do we have? Like over 100, and we have, for different languages, we have different pronunciations and we articulate differently. And how long do we take to learn a language, which is pretty long to be really good at it. And so in terms of complexity, I do think it's really, really hard. It's a lot more complex than that of other species.
How is the language formed?
Well, I think to form a language, you actually need to, it's actually based on a group of people, because you need to, if you're by yourself, you won't talk. And just like, if someone live in a forest for like long time by himself, like Tyson, you know, like he's staying with the wolf for so long, and he couldn't speak any language. So in order to form a language, I think you need like a group of people so you can communicate, and I think that's how the language formed.
Yes. In psychology, yesterday, I learned that everyone has something dark inside of them, whether we want to admit it or not. So yes. That's all we learn in human nature, actually, or in my class anyways, and I just think that it's a very good theory. I don't know, I think there's lots of proof to back it up, and just personally I do believe in it because it's very logical and of all the evidence.
Yeah, because all the things that you've been taught kind of give you a different view on things. Like if you've been taught a certain political affiliation or something, then that can affect you later on. Or your customs, like if you see somebody from another country, then they have different customs from you, then you can interpret them differently.
Culture is related to human nature in the fact that our culture is kind of depicting of who we are, and it, in my opinion, how do I say this? It kind of shapes how we treat people and how we interact with people. I've had the luck of living in multiple different cultures, so I don't really think it does. But I know that people who have lived in just one culture their entire life, it definitely changes their nuances.
Well, a study in which monkeys that had never seen a snake were shown a snake and they were terrified, suggesting that that kind of reaction was hardwired and would be hardwired in humans.
Yes.
I think culture is a direct reflection of how humans interact with each other, so that's how it's related to nature.
I believe a language is formed by people kind of teaching it through. It has to be acted out and more so heard and practiced more than anything else. You can't really just study it, you have to be living in it, is what
I believe your culture and what you learn from your family members and just how you're raised is how your human nature is created with yourself. That's just how you learn how to be.
Study of primates can help us understand human nature by witnessing their behavior and how they adapt to their environment, and we can understand how we might adapt to our environment given certain circumstances.
I have a somewhat belief in evolution. I think that there's so many different beliefs in evolution that there could be many of ways of how the earth could have been created, and also from the biblical perspective, how God created it. But I think there is a good chance that evolution is real and that we were created from a big boom. But I mean, I don't know, there's just so many different different stories and myths about how the world's been started and how long it's been around, so you never really know.
Related to human nature.
In what way?
How is culture related to the way that all of us are, the way that we're the same? Like, is culture the same all over?
No,
or
there's cultural differences.
I think it's who we are as a person, it's how we conduct ourselves, it's the culture that we were brought up in, it's how we live our day-to-day life.
I believe that we need to have more understanding of the different cultures that are around us. My family is very multicultural. We have Koreans and we have African American, and I think that we need to be more understanding of different cultures.
I do believe in evolution. I think it occurs in all species. I think that it's just how we adapt and evolve to become what we are today.
Because your views of the world depend on how you were raised and where you were born. But as I've grown, I've learned that everyone's different, and I pretty much see everyone the same way.
Natural selection is the guys that can't get laid. They can't pass on their genes to the next generation. Natural selection is the guys that can't get laid. They can't pass on their genes to the next generation.
Language is formed out of necessity for people needing to express themselves and have other people understand what it is they need and want.
I feel like primates and we are so closely related that maybe we can use primates to understand how some of our instincts, where they come from, and where they're going too. Maybe we're just all connected on an evolutionary chain, and they're interesting to look at either way.
To be naturally violent because
I thought you were listening in.
We didn't always have the ability to rationalize things and think things out or have languages to talk about how we're feeling about something, and so we would use our physical force in order to display how we were feeling. And I think that at times that would come out in a violent nature.
It's impossible for them not to. We all see the world through the prism of our past experiences.
Automatically. Languages come about by default. Children especially just have language. They just know how to do it. Because we're built that way.
Language is formed when people want to find a way to better communicate with each other, and they want to make sense of what's going on around them and the world, and they just want to share it with somebody instead of just keeping it inside, so they find better and better ways to communicate and find a way to interact.
It means selecting a group to work with to manipulate your environment.
Studying bonobos helps us understand how college freshmen hook up when they're drunk.
Yes, I do, because I grew up in Portland and I hate Californians.
I guess I consider humans to be less naturally violent and more naturally competitive, and I think that there are some that have more of a moral flexibility, so that while violence may not be their intention, they will do whatever they have to get what they want. We're a progressive culture, and I feel like by nature we will continue to do whatever. Some of us will do whatever we can to constantly be going on an incline rather than decline.
Culture, I think, is a product of the environment that you grew up in, which directly affects your views and therefore affects your knowledge and your interaction with human nature.
I would say yes, because humans seem to have more complex relationships with one another than animals have with each other, so their human language has to dictate those emotions and relationships through the language, so yes, I would say it is more complex.
Natural selection to me means that you will survive if you have the ability to progress forward despite the elements that are against you. So yeah, so like what that woman was saying, like if you have strong genetics, like you have a strong mind and your mind can overcome like emotional instability or mental illness, I guess.
I have to say that they definitely do, and that how you're raised definitely. Going into a different city. I was born in Alabama, coming to Portland. Some of the things that were like, ingrained in me as a kid become a little odd here, and then people here have felt, influence how certain things that I learned growing up were kind of wrong, but they were kind of forced growing up.
I think it helps us understand that we're not much different from other animals, and clearly primates are closely related. And I think they, similar aggressive tendencies and cultural needs within their community. And studying them helps us, preserve hopefully their lives and learn a little bit about ourselves as well.
Sweet.